Well, good evening, everybody. So I was sent this TikTok video by a subscriber who thought that it might be worth responding to. And after having watched the video, I agree. You see, this TikTok video, it makes all those talking points that are often made by people who think that the current exploitation of non-human animals cannot be called a Holocaust. So let's take it from the top, right? Let's begin.
Hey everyone, if you are in the animal rights community, it's very possible that you've been hearing talk about whether or not it is okay to compare the Holocaust to animal agriculture. There are many reasons as to why this comparison can be extremely harmful and why I am completely against using that comparison, so I just wanted to come on here and explain a few of those reasons. The term Holocaust is explicitly associated with the Jewish Holocaust, the actual event that happened. There's no way that you can separate the term and the actual event.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. So first, let's talk about the Holocaust, what she refers to as the actual event. And then we can talk about other Holocausts against other human beings in other parts of the world. So Britannica.com defines Holocaust in the context of European history. That's important. It defines it as the systemic state-sponsored killing of 6 million Jewish men, women, and children, and millions of others by Nazi Germany and its collaborators during World War II. So who are these millions of others that she is clearly forgetting? You see, the Nazis did not stop at killing 6 million Jewish people, which would be enough of a moral atrocity to make it one of the worst moral atrocities to ever have been committed against human beings. But unfortunately, they did not stop at 6 million Jewish people. You see, alongside killing 6 million Jewish people, the Nazis also killed 5.7 million Soviet civilians, around 2.8 to 3.3 million Soviet prisoners of war, between 1.8 to 3 million Polish people, between 300,000 to 600,000 Serbs, around 270,000 disabled people, between 130,000 to 500,000 Romani people, between 80,000 to 200,000 Freemasons, between 20,000 to 15,000 Slovenes, between 5,000 to 15,000 homosexual people, around 3,500 Spanish Republicans, and anywhere between 1,250 to 5,000 Jehovah's Witnesses. And that takes up the death toll of the Holocaust within the context of European history to about 17 million people. Yet the TikToker only talks about the 6 million Jewish people who were killed. Don't get me wrong, it is important to remember the 6 million Jewish people. And it is equally important to remember everyone else who was also killed during the Holocaust in the context of European history. If you claim to care so much about this period of history, about the Holocaust, but so easily forget about 2/3 of the victims who were killed in the Holocaust in the context of European history, then you don't really care about the Holocaust. You're just virtue signaling. Now, as promised, let's talk about a different Holocaust that took place against different human beings in a different part of the world. As reference, we will be using this book, An Era of Darkness, the British Empire in India, written by Dr. Shashi Tharoor, who is an Indian MP, that's Member of Parliament. Page number 176. As a result of what one can only call the British colonial Holocaust, thanks to economic policies ruthlessly enforced by Britain, between 30 and 35 million Indians needlessly died. Oh, by the way, if you want to learn more about the British colonial Holocaust, I have made a whole video about that, and I will link that somewhere around here and also down in the description box, so be sure to check that out. Now, is it at all offensive to you that Dr. Shashi Tharoor called that a Holocaust? If it is at all offensive to you, right, you have some serious bias against Indians. You are not fighting anti-Semitism if you're opposing the use of the term Holocaust to refer to the killing of 30 to 35 million Indians. You're not fighting for justice. You're not fighting the good fight. You just are expressing the serious bias that you have against Indians. Similarly, when you oppose the use of the term Holocaust to refer to the current exploitation of non-human animals, you are not fighting anti-Semitism. You are not fighting racism against Indians. You are just expressing your speciesism. You're just expressing this very serious bias that you have against non-human animals. And yes, you can be biased against non-human animals even if you don't enslave them or eat them. Oh, by the way, if you're finding this video to be insightful, a sub to the channel would be just amazing. It really helps out a small channel like mine out.
There's no way that you can separate the term and the actual event.
We're not trying to separate the term from the Holocaust in the context of European history. No, we're just using the term where it applies. The killing of 30 to 35 million Indians fits the definition of a Holocaust, and therefore it is a Holocaust. The current exploitation of non-human animals, about 200 million land animals per day, and about 2,700 million marine animals per day, fits the definition of a Holocaust, and therefore it is a Holocaust. And it cannot be logically concluded that anyone who uses the term Holocaust to refer to the current exploitation of non-human animals is trying to separate the word from the Holocaust in the context of European history. That is a claim, right? That someone is trying to separate the word from the event. And you'll need to provide evidence for it, right? What can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. If you're claiming without evidence that someone is trying to separate the word from the actual event, your claim can be dismissed without evidence.
Therefore, when you bring up that term in animal advocacy, you are very possibly triggering many people that were either affected by the Holocaust or have been affected by anti-Semitism in any way.
I'm going to use the example of the British colonial Holocaust, right? So if someone gets triggered by my use of the term British colonial Holocaust because they have been either affected by the Holocaust in the context of European history or anti-Semitism, I'm going to explain to them that, look, this comparison is not meant to be demeaning. It's not meant to diminish the suffering of all the people that the Nazis killed, all 17 million of them. It is not meant to do that. It is meant to recognize the horrible suffering of all of those 17 million people, right? And to say, like, look, this was one of the worst things to ever have happened in history, right? And there's this other thing, the British colonial Holocaust, and that we need to recognize the brutality and the injustice in that scenario as well. So that's what I'm going to do. What I am not going to do is I am not going to dilute the suffering of the 30 to 35 million Indians who were killed at the hands of the British Empire. That is something I'm simply not willing to do. I'm sorry if it upsets you, but you'll just have to get used to it. I am going to call it the British colonial Holocaust because I think that is the only way to express the brutality of what the empire did. And for similar reasons, I am going to call the current exploitation of non-human animals a Holocaust as well.
Animal agriculture is one of the worst and most violent industries that exist, and it stands alone. You do not need to compare it to any other historical event.
No, of course you don't have to compare it. I will never demand that someone use the term Holocaust if they don't want to. So yes, it doesn't have to be compared. It's not a necessity, but it is an effective comparison, and there are very good reasons for making that comparison. I'll give you just one. You see, because no one ever told you that there was a British colonial Holocaust, you have no idea about the 30 to 35 million Indians who were killed in the British colonial Holocaust. Had people in the West been told about the British colonial Holocaust more often, they would know about the 30 to 35 million Indians who were killed, and they would take it more seriously. what is perhaps one of the worst crimes to ever have been committed against human beings, which is the British colonial Holocaust, would not have been turned into a joke by the Western world. It would have been treated with the severity that it deserves to be treated with. And for similar reasons, what is currently happening to non-human animals can be called a Holocaust. I would not demand that you call it a Holocaust if you don't want to. But when you do call it a Holocaust, it expresses accurately the severity of what is currently going on to non-human animals. Also, the current exploitation of non-human animals is not one of the worst moral atrocities to have ever taken place. It is the worst moral atrocity to have ever taken place. You see, I would never say that the British colonial Holocaust was obviously worse than the Holocaust in the context of European history, because even though almost twice as many people were killed in the British colonial Holocaust, I think it is very difficult to say which one was worse unless the number of victims are orders of magnitudes higher in one moral atrocity. So even though twice as many people were killed in the British colonial Holocaust, it's not orders of magnitudes higher. So I wouldn't call it obviously worse. The current exploitation of non-human animals is a different case altogether. 200 million land animals are killed every single day. About 2,700 million marine animals are killed every single day. So about 2,900 million animals altogether killed every single day. And that's per day. Okay, that's per day, right? Think about what happens in 10 days. Think about what happens in 1 year. Think about what happens in 10 years. This is orders of magnitudes higher. Therefore, the current exploitation of non-human animals is by far the worst moral atrocity to have ever taken place.
In fact, even if you wanted to just use the definition term of Holocaust, which you can't, it's not even effective because it completely erases the breeding process, the exploitation, the use.
That is very weird reasoning. Yes, that a lot of other things also go on in the current exploitation of non-human animals. But a Holocaust is one of those things, right? If someone breeded a human being, right, and then killed them, that's still murder. So even though the term murder doesn't cover the breeding process, right, that they carried out to sort of create that human being, right, that is still murder, right?
You can fight for animal rights without harming other human beings.
That is very true, and I completely support that message. But what I would also like to say is that no one is harming other human beings by calling the current exploitation of non-human animals a Holocaust, just as no one is harming other human beings by referring to the killing of 30 to 35 million Indians by the British Empire as the British colonial Holocaust.
You can fight for animal rights without harming other human beings.
And you can fight anti-Semitism and fight for animal liberation without being so utterly Western-centric. Anyway, that's been it for this video. I've been Aditya Prakash, or Soytheist. I would like to thank you for watching this video, and especially thank my patrons on Patreon, who, by the way, voted for the topic of this video and had early access to this video. There are other benefits as well, starting from just $1 a month. And while the website will say that it is per YouTube video and you can support me per YouTube video, you will have the option to limiting your patronage to just twice a month or just once a month. So if you choose the $3 membership, you won't be paying me $3 every single time I post a video. You will be paying me $3 per month, and that's it. So be sure to check that out. You can also follow me on social media here, and especially on Instagram, where I share my more candid thoughts, mostly in the form of reels. So be sure to check that out as well. Links are in the description. And if you aren't subscribed to my YouTube channel, well, subscribe to my YouTube channel. by the time you're watching this video, I have probably already recorded the next video. Leave a like if you like the video. Leave a dislike if you dislike the video. Leave a comment letting me know what your thoughts are. I will be in the comment section for a while after publishing this video, and we can have some discussions there. And with that, I will see you in the next video.